Hello. All right. Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. It's the Thursday deep dive. And just a programming note, this is the last deep dive of 2024. So we'll see you again on January 9th. So just there's a big library of shows you may have missed that I hope you will familiarize yourself with, pinned to the top of my Twitter page, which is at Keith Malinak, which is likely where you're at right now. Just look for the pinned tweet there. Also available at youtube.com/at the mic. See, when I say /at the mic, it's like this. And thank you to Penguin Wrangler. All right, I can say that there. So it's at the. I don't know why YouTube added the @ sign thing, but they did. So there you go. So check out the archives there, the Thursday deep dives that we've been doing since June. All sorts of fun conversations there. And then, of course, the Friday live stream we've been doing all year in 2024. Okay, so I don't want to delay any longer. Thanks for making time. Oh, you know what? I got to do this. I got to put on my founding fathers hat from see the old Glenn Beck logo there, my boss. Look at that. That's old school logo, the G. So I got the Sam Adams, you got George Washington, and you got Ben Franklin. And so I think I'm going to wear that in honor of this conversation with author Matt Clark, who I'm going to bring in here right now. Matt, first of all, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing today, Keith?
I'm doing great, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation because this is a big book with a lot of information, and my gosh, I just love original sources. Books about the founding of this country and the early history of America that lean on original source material like this book does. It's The Founding Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles. What an important book. Matt Clark, thanks for making time, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate everything.
Absolutely. All right, let me get all my stuff organized here.
All right.
It's as I say every time I do anything live stream, I am the world's most unorganized person, but I've tried to get I've tried to get everything in order that I want to ask you about. Well, first of all, let me ask you this. At what point in your life did you say, hey, I really dig these founding father guys? Because I mean, for me, I don't. It's difficult to pinpoint it. I'm an American history geek. I love the founders. I don't know exactly where. It was probably just kind of weaved in through talk radio, listening to Rush Limbaugh starting at age 12, and then just different conservative hosts through the years, and then finally, it's not until I stopped and I really did a lot of reading. And this book is a great great pickup for somebody who wants to and there it is. There's the book right there. It's at Amazon.com. But when did you get into the founding fathers, Matt?
Well, that's an interesting question. Part of it, I would say, started in the bicentennial year. I was just getting ready to turn 6 years old. And of course, the whole country was celebrating the bicentennial. There was, flags and banners and commercials, and a lot of it had to do with the founding fathers. And my dad is also kind of a big history geek. He reads all kinds of different kinds of things. And so growing up, whenever we took family trips, we would try to include historical spots of different kinds, not just the founding fathers, but a lot of it was focused on them. We went to several different presidential libraries and their birthplaces and the museums. And then throughout time, it just kind of grew from there. Of course, we always talked about in church about the founding fathers quite often, and about the founding of the country and how the two are connected. So yeah, it started at a very young age. I'm going to say about 5.5 or so.
That's awesome.
Grew from there.
And I was born in 1976. So I've just never heard anyone talk about how important that era, that year was, and getting them into a love for the founding of this country. And it really gets me hopeful, and it gets me excited to think that what President Trump wants to do in 2026 on the 250th anniversary of our nation, with a year-long, I guess for lack of a better word, festival. Um, that's going to be that. Hopefully, that's a renaissance waiting to happen for love of country. So that's
Oh,
interesting.
absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. That'd be really, really awesome. And it'd be great for our country as well.
Sure.
Um, you know, with the adults in this country, I'd say probably even anywhere from my age on down, a lot of
Mhm.
people don't know very much. Um,
Sure.
and so,
It's interesting.
you know,
It's interesting you say that because it's almost like this love of country, this respect for the founders and the genius that they were, that they
mhm.
had, um, gathered in this one place. It's almost like a counterculture has developed. In other words, making the founding fathers cool again almost seems like a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and by the way, can I just say as an aside, I don't want to overstate the team that Donald Trump is assembling right now for his second term, but it's probably as close to um, rebirth or recreation of the founding fathers that we're ever going to get. Right? I mean,
Oh,
you've
and
got
yeah,
some
absolutely.
very successful people that are all coming together for this one common cause to save our country. So there's at least this thread there. There's some connection there with the founders. So anyway, I just wanted to
Well,
throw that out there. But
yeah,
anyway,
no,
continue.
that's great. Yeah, well, with anything, you need to go back to the roots if you want to restore it
Mhm. Yeah,
to what
right,
it,
right.
what it was supposed to be. And I'm ecstatic that he's doing that. And
Mhm.
I just hope nobody gets in the way and
Yeah,
you know
right.
kind of messes it
Sure.
up.
Exactly.
But,
So,
yeah,
but you're right though. For us to really appreciate this country, then we have to appreciate its history. And if you're going to appreciate its history, you've got to appreciate its founding. And if you're going to appreciate its founding, then you're going to have to appreciate the founding fathers. And that's what your book does. It takes their words and it just I mean it just lays out the facts, And so by the way, how long did it take you to write this book? I want to point out how thick this thing is. I mean, this is no
um,
small book.
and initially, yeah, it was about 2 years or so, 2 years
Hmm.
of research, and then about a year and a half of putting it together because
Wow, wow.
I had to re-research myself several times as I was going through. I can't even tell you how many times that I went through and was my own editor and proof checker,
Hmm.
rechecking and rechecking. And anytime I found any kind of a different source, I went to it to validate it against what I'd already researched. So yeah, it all in all, it took about a good 3.5 years putting it all together.
Wow, I don't doubt it, man. And like I said, whenever you can go to the original sources, that is so important. And don't forget, you can get this, I guess it's at Amazon.com. It's the Founding
It is.
Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles. And I'm about to get into the book with you here because I have some questions.
Okay.
Let me just say that it's really been in the news in the last week or so about oh my gosh, prayer in Oklahoma schools. I can't,
Mhm. Oh
it's
yeah.
like the reaction to what the education secretary in Oklahoma under Governor Kevin Stitt is proposing. You would think that it's well, it's almost like dumping holy water onto demons. The way that the media has reacted to that, and then here in Texas, they're talking about infusing. And it depends on the source. The mainstream media is making it sound like it's going to be Sunday school class
Yeah.
for Texas school children,
Yeah.
and And all it is acknowledging. I don't have the story in front of me, but it's almost like I know one of the lessons is something about like the golden rule, and you know, heaven forbid we teach people the golden rule:
Yeah.
do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then what was the other thing I was reading? It was it was about how like the Last Supper painting, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's Jesus. It's just a fact. If you're talking about this specific piece of art,
Yeah.
that's Jesus Christ in there. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's such a
Well,
they're trying to make it into something that it is not.
well, it's really frustrating because quote unquote art, they can get federal funding and these artists can go and they can take something like that and deface it, and that's
Right?
considered art. But if
And
you were
that's
to put
why.
that up in its original form and say
Mm-hmm.
this is just a piece of art, no, that's not. You're trying to indoctrinate me and my
Right. That's
children and grandchildren into believing in this person. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
so
you can't.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So okay. Let's see. How can we start this? Why don't we just kind of go through, because you've taken this book and you've broken it into 10 parts. And so what I thought we might do is, we can do this however you want to, Matt,
Okay.
honestly. But I guess I just want to kind of start in order with the founding documents that you
Sure.
put here at the front of the book. Explain why did you choose to go that route?
Well,
Just putting
I
that up
wanted,
front is what I'm saying.
yeah, I wanted to, yeah, and that's a good question because I toyed with should I put him in the front or put him in the
Mm,
back,
hmm.
because I know how some people are and they don't want to read through documents. I understand that. It reminds them of going to high school. Um, but I put them there because that's basically the beginning of this whole establishment of how they were going to put this country together and what they were going to found it upon. And so they knew, of course, they came here from Europe to flee mostly persecution because, in Europe, the monarchies and the churches would collaborate and they would force the citizens and even the clergy against their will to believe certain things and say certain things. And if you didn't do it, the least that would happen would you be in prison. The worst that happened, you'd be tortured and then die. Um, so they came here. They did not want to repeat that. So I went through the documents and started searching out everywhere that they mentioned any kind of a reference to God, and
Mm,
then uh, went back and wherever I could find any kind of reference in their personal writings that had to do with them talking about God and talking about Jesus, and especially in the form of Jesus as the Savior, because there's a lot of people out there that say that the founders just kind of blew him off as just kind of a person in the Bible, not divine. That the founders didn't believe that Jesus was a divine individual, and that's just not true. Um, so when I cross-reference all of those, it reassured me that I could go in and find all these documents. So then what I did was I wanted to find every version of the documents that I could find, even the ones that they didn't use. So
hmm.
that's why my book even has those. It has the different drafts and then it has the final draft that they finally agreed upon. And as in with the Declaration of Independence, they do make a reference to God.
See,
Um,
now
yeah.
that's interesting that you mentioned that. I want to I I forgot which of my live streams this came up, but maybe it might have been the last Friday live stream. I think we were talking about our favorite books, and I mentioned this book in my hands, which was published in
Mhm.
1888, and like a dummy, I read most of it on the train coming from Western New Jersey into Manhattan. And so, of course, like a dummy, I had this in my bag, and the spine, of course, got weak. But anyway, I regret that. But this is the I'm sorry, I think I said 1880. Yeah, 1895. I'm sorry. It's the American Congress,
Okay.
a history of national
Yeah.
legislation and political events, 1774. to 1895. And I absolutely
Mhm.
love this book, not just because it's this old, dusty, 30-year-old thing, um, but because, much like your book, it's original sources, and
Yeah.
what gets lost in history is maybe someone will write a history book, or they'll try to tell a story, and there's this inherent bias in it. But
Sure.
if you have something like this or something like this, all this leans on are excerpts from speeches on the floor of Congress and the House and the Senate that that just really puts into perspective what the mood was at the time. So it's interesting that you just said a lot of the stuff that was left out, you put in there because they wrote it, and it's kind of like some of these things that were said in Congress that are left out of history books. Well, these
Mhm.
speeches were still given, and their attitudes and their opinions are reflected in
Yeah.
their stances at the time. So I think it's great that you actually did that with your book.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But you mentioned 1895, but there's a Supreme Court decision in my book from 1892, where a judge made uh, a decision, and he based it upon the United States is a Christian nation, not in that it is a nation that uh, establishes it as a religion, but they established it as their faith upon God and upon Jesus Christ as the Savior for those who are converted to Christianity.
Well, and let's explore one of the parts in your book. I think the section is called God, Country, and Deism. Let's
Yes,
can we pause there for just a moment and talk
sure.
about the argument that many who want to kind of dilute America's history and reliance on Judeo-Christian principles early on. They want to talk about the founders as being deists. What can you tell us about that?
Well, deism was a philosophy that I believe, if I remember correctly, it came out of Europe, of course. It was an early, let's see, what would it be, 18th century kind of a idea, and what that idea was um, is it removed any kind of intervention on God's behalf. So they do believe in God. A deist does
Mhm.
believe that God exists. God is the creator. God did create all things. Um, but a deist believes that once God created those things, that he just kind of wiped his hands of it and said, okay, you guys, you're on your own.
Mhm.
And that's just not true. In the documents of the founding fathers, they were not deists. They absolutely believed that God intervened at many different times, from even before the American Revolution even actually started. They believed that them coming to this land was something that God led them to do, and
Mhm.
through that time it was developed. In the colonies were developed as they went along, and they came here to flee different things and have a better life. Um, but then when it just kind of came along a little bit, it's almost as if people just kind of wanted to slowly remove God from things, even
Right.
back then. Um, so but the founders, they they spoke about how if this is God's will, we will be a free and independent nation from England, and we believe that it is God's will, and we believe that God will bring us there if we are fighting for it for the right reasons. And that's the key. That's the key to everything when it comes to you know I don't mean to get on a soapbox here or anything, but in a person's relationship with God, of course, in Christianity, the belief is that you're to do God's will. So they wanted to do God's will
Mhm.
in creating this country, and they had a lot of obstacles, and they couldn't do it all in one day, of course. Um, but they were more of the theistic type who they absolutely believe that God does intervene and did.
So so and they absolutely leaned on that belief through multiple miracles that they witnessed
Oh yeah,
during the
absolutely.
Revolutionary War, and some of the events around the founding. I should have brought it over here. I don't know. I can see it from here, about, I don't know, 10 feet from me is my copy of the Jefferson Bible. And Thomas Jefferson is someone that many people say, they point to him
Mhm.
as proof positive that that we're just a secular nation. And just look at Thomas Jefferson himself. Like, what can you tell us about TJ and
Well,
his belief system?
well, he of course believed in God. He let me start it with this. Thomas Jefferson, of course, was a scientist. Okay, so he looked at things through a scientist's perspective, but he also never um, decided, okay, I found out everything I need to know about this. I'm good. Till the day he died, he researched and read and found books, bought books from Europe, got different people's perspectives on things, different writings, Greek and Latin and other languages. And then but he would always go back to the Bible and compare it to the Bible. So here's kind of where I found that Jefferson is on that. Of course, um, as I said, he believed in God and he did believe in Jesus Christ. He referred to Jesus Christ as the venerated reformer of human errors, and that's the only person in biblical history who was. So that's obviously Jesus Christ.
Right.
Um, so he believed that a person should be allowed to believe as they chose. If you wanted to believe in God, if you did believe in God, that's okay, great. If you didn't, that's your right. You should be free to do that. The government should not interfere with that. Um, but he was a searcher. He was always searching, and he kind of evolved in this through time, because there are letters where he says things that, that's the thing about the language that they used back then. For us today, it's kind of hard to uh, translate it,
Hmm.
correctly, because they used wording differently than we did. Um, and that was another part of the thing too about and all the research. I went and got a dictionary from that time period
Oh,
to
wow, good for you.
to research the words, to find out what they meant at that time. So in researching somebody like Thomas Jefferson, I went back to the dictionary I could find closest to that period of time and looked up the words of what they meant, such as deism and venerated and all these different words. But okay, so Jefferson, people say he was a deist. They say he rejected Jesus Christ as being divine. No, he didn't. He did not. Like I said, he referred to him as the venerated reformer of all human errors. And he referred to himself as a true Christian. And that is someone who believed and followed the word of God exactly how it was written, not how somebody told you that it reads. So he believed when he said it's up to the individual, that's based on your understanding. And people are going to have different understandings. And that's a whole other discussion right there, how people can have different understandings of scriptures. But he wanted people to be able to just live their life quietly. You believe how you believe, and that should be allowed. But he did believe that this nation came about through God. 1779, it's in my book. He issued a proclamation during a time of war, and it's a long proclamation, very long. And he refers to God Almighty, and there's so many times that God has done this, God has done that. We ask that God do this. We need God's help. We need God's guidance that we do the right thing. All these different things. So he was on board with that. And since you read through my book, we can talk about the Jefferson Bible here. I
Yeah.
don't
Well,
have
so,
I don't have one because I refuse to buy one that says Jefferson Bible on it.
oh, wow,
I
okay.
know that's kind
Uh,
of weird, but
no, no, to each his own. So I will say though, you're right. Thomas Jefferson is, and this is one of the reasons I really respect him as much as any founding father, is that he did ask questions, and he did his own research, and I love that about him. And it's disingenuous to think that all of a sudden when you first become a public figure, or whatever, let's just say you're 20 years old, that you have figured everything out. You might think you figured everything out,
Mhm.
but that's just not the case. And
No,
and he had no qualms about publicly or through letters, um, of just asking questions and
yeah,
maybe having doubts here and there.
sure.
But
Yeah,
everybody, I mean, we're lying to ourselves if we say that we have it all figured out from the moment we first hear that there's a Jesus until we die. You're gonna have ebbs and flows with
sure.
faith, and so I really respect that at least he was
Well,
he
yeah,
was seeking.
you have to ask questions to grow in your knowledge
Right.
of anything. I mean, you think about it as a surgeon, just okay, I know all I need to know. I can go cut this person open and fix them. It's the same kind of thing. You have to keep studying and keep
Hmm.
growing because he's going to ask questions, and the people use those questions to twist it into, oh, see,
But
he
that's
had
the other.
doubts. He
And
had
that's the other.
doubts.
You can take anybody's words out of context. Someone
Sure.
could go through this entire conversation that you are having and take out a sentence or two here and there and make it sound like we are,
Oh, sure.
monsters.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
right, and I
And
just
that's what
that's the
people do
kind
with
of
Jefferson
history.
and others.
That's why your book is so important. That's why getting history from original sources in context is so important, because
Yes,
those that write the history
absolutely.
books, oftentimes like to just pick and choose, like you said. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
let's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, no,
No,
no.
I
Go
was
ahead,
just
man.
gonna say real quick that people take, that's why also in my book that I put these letters as some of them are in full, the full letters in there.
Hmm.
Some of them, I did have to put a certain amount of to set the context of it. So I
Yeah.
have leading into it, the content, and then a little bit after to keep the consistency of the content of what he was saying. But you can also go into the bibliography and you can go in, which we'll talk about that too, about my primary sources. Anybody can go in and find those and they can check me up and down and sideways. Um, I put in the good, the bad, the not so pretty, the everything,
Yep.
because that's part of the story. These are people, they were not perfect starting out. Nobody is a perfect person. And,
Mhm.
they were growing. They changed their ideas about things. They may have said, I was wrong about that, or that's maybe not good for the country. Even though I believe in it, it's not good for it. And so people need to take the whole thing in the context instead of, like you were saying, just taking a little bit out. Oh, see what they said? That means everything in their whole life is based on that. And that's
Right.
not
Yep. Okay, so let's stick with Thomas Jefferson for a
sure.
second here and talk about the treaties with the pirates and
Okay.
all that good stuff there, because that's where, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be where it becomes very clear that the founders, after after the nation has been established,
Mhm.
describes us as being, quote, a Christian nation. Correct? Am I
Correct.
right? I think, yeah.
Correct. You are correct. Yes, absolutely. Um,
So set the
so
stage of that whole era where the treaties are being made with the Tripoli
yeah, they had,
pirates. Go ahead.
yeah, they had different pirates in that part of
Yeah.
the world who were, they were attacking ships and they were stealing ships and enslaving our sailors and so on and so forth. And at, the point they were paying ransom.
Right.
But the pirates, of course, hey, look, it's free money. Um, so they
Some
just
things
kept
never
on.
change, Matt.
I
In that part
know.
of the world,
You-
kidnapping
you-
people for
yeah.
ransom
If
payments.
if I pay them a ransom, they'll stop.
Right.
No, they're going to keep on doing it. So he eventually sent a delegation over there, and they met with the leadership of the pirates, and they came up with a treaty. There's several different treaties because there's several
Uh-huh.
um, different groups of pirates that they made these treaties with. The one I think you might be leading up to, of course, is the January 1797 Treaty of Tripoli, where a man named Joel Barlow was given the task of translating part of the treaty into Arabic, I believe. And of course, in there it says that the U.S. is, I'm paraphrasing, in no way founded upon the Christian religion. And so people use that one a lot to say, look, and John Adams was president at the time. John Adams signed that. Well, so again, I went to the primary sources. I found all of the Barbary treaties. And I found all of the subtext, everything that was involved. Found it at Yale University. Barlow did translate that in that way, which can be taken two different ways. It can be taken that he meant that Christianity has no part of this country, or it also means that we were not founded upon religion, which we weren't. We were founded upon God and Christianity. And so that's where we start getting into this thing of parsecing everything down that Christianity is not a religion. So anyway, he got pushed back on that. Long story short, that was removed from the treaty.
Right.
And I
love that you point that out.
Yeah, it was removed. And there was a senator, and I can't remember his name right now, or congressman. He demanded that it be removed because he took offense to what that said, that it mentioned that Christianity wasn't part of the country. And it ended up being they did their notations on it from that time are that it was a poor translation on the part of Joe Barlow. Now, Joe Barlow is an interesting character in of himself, which I lay a little bit out about him in that book. Perhaps not such a scrupulous man at times in his life. So anyway, you kind of got to look into all these different things because I want to know who is Joe Barlow.
Yeah, unravel it.
You know, why is this? Why did he say that? Well, it's in my book. He's not necessarily the most scrupulous of persons, but you know, they changed it, and they revised the treaty, and it's in the book as well.
Isn't that fascinating that the founding fathers, because it was still so early in our nation's story, that they weren't going to let that stand. And I think what that does is that lends credence to their overall collective idea that, you know what, we actually are, and we're not going to stand for this document saying that we're not a Christian nation.
Right.
And you can be a Christian nation and not be a theocracy.
Correct.
I mean, we're talking about principles. We're talking because it's undeniable that the foundations for this government and for the laws therein are based in Christian principles. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, you know, opening up Leviticus and saying this is how we're going to run our country. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah, no, not at all. And see, that reflects back to my childhood, because in my childhood it was, we are a Christian nation, but you don't have to go to church. You don't have to believe in God, but we are. Those of us who are, we are. We're not dominating you. We're all a community together, and we're all should be accepting of each other, and not you know, looking down on anybody because of what they are or who they aren't. So yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, so can we talk about education in the United States?
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, do you mind if I back up just a little bit, though?
Of course.
I do want to add in a couple of things. Oh, I want to add a couple of things about the treaties. They talk about that treaty, but in the same year, 1797, in August, there was another treaty issued, the Treaty of Amity with the pirates, and it outright refers to the president of the Congress who is a follower of the Messiah.
I'm so glad you took us back to that. Thank you. Yes.
And so you also have at the meantime that while John Adams signs this treaty that has this Article 11 in it. At the same time, he's releasing, which were ratified by Congress, proclamations calling upon the recommendation of the nation to come together as they choose, if they choose to, in a day of prayer, fasting, and thankfulness to God for his blessings on this country, for his help, for his forgiveness, and for him to lead them down the right path and to make changes where they need to make changes. So it's very contradictory for him to sign, if he did sign this treaty that says that we're not a Christian nation, then to turn around and sign another treaty that says that we are, and then at the same time issue proclamations that call upon the nation to pray to God and bow before him on any certain day. And I mean, it was a full-out day. It was a day of fasting, no work. You gathered with your family and your community as you chose to, and you took this day and you did with it as you chose to. You weren't required. There wasn't, anybody. They didn't send soldiers out to make sure that everybody was praying. They didn't do, they didn't do any of that. You went in your community. If your community had a service, which I'm guessing that probably they all did, you either went or you didn't go, and that was it.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to bring that up on the tail end of that. Not because I didn't want to focus just on the Treaty of Tripoli.
Sure.
There's a lot of people.
I'm so glad you didn't let me blow
Yeah.
right by that. That's
No,
very
that's okay.
important.
That's all right.
No, that's good
No, that's
stuff
fine.
there.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that's the thing about history is you got to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
You have to put the pieces together. So we need to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a standalone section in the book as well. All of these treaties and how they fit together there with the pirates.
Right. And I even included, I think at least one, maybe two treaties that don't have a reference to God in it. But that doesn't mean that they were removing God. It just means that they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't use God's name in that document. But they always use in the year of our Lord, which is also a consecration in the year following the years of the birth since the birth of Christ. So they are consecrating the document still in God's name, even if they don't outright mention God as part of the document. And that's not just a euphemism or a casual saying or, oh, that's just something everybody said like hello. No, no, it meant something. And it still does mean something, whether people agree with it or not. It still means something.
So, section 4 of your book talks about early American education.
Mhm.
Tell us how, in the 250 years of America's existence, how has education changed?
We have 6 hours.
How much time you got?
Do we have 6 hours to talk about it?
No kidding. Man.
Okay. Well, of course, back then we didn't have a Department of Education. We had, state community schools that were funded by the state and run by the communities. But one thing was for certain in the early American schools is they utilized a couple of different books, the New England Primer and the Blueback Speller. They also used the McGuffey Reader later on, which still contained references that we're about to speak to. These books were not used to teach religious dogma in the classrooms. What they were used for was to teach moral principles. And it's from the perspective of the Bible about honesty, integrity, good, strong character, love for your family, love for your neighbors. You won't do your neighbors wrong. You will always be upright and honest and fair dealing with everybody. You're not a thief. You're not a cheat. You're not a liar. You have the utmost integrity and character. And that's what it was for. It wasn't for anything, like I said, having to do with teaching you how to be a good Catholic or Episcopalian or anybody else. It was using God's word, teachings of Jesus Christ, to say, this is how you treat your brother, your sister in the community, within your family, and throughout the entire nation. This is how we are to treat each other. And we want our children to grow up with those values, which are very important values. Very, very important.
Right. Yeah. Um, it seems like they've gotten a little bit off track, a
Yeah.
little bit wayward from the mission statement.
Yeah.
And by the way, I hate to jump around, but one of the things I meant to mention to you, um, when we were talking about those treaties with the pirates and
Uh-huh.
stuff, um, correct me if I'm wrong here, because you provided this because I asked you for some stuff here, and you wanted to point out like this meme that goes around here,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
that one.
the John Adams quote that says,
Mhm,
"The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." End quote. And this
mhm.
is the part where you said it got changed. Um, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm honestly I'm not positive I have this right, but part of what they were trying to do there is they knew they were communicating with a nation, the with a
Right,
people that based their government structure on religion,
right.
on
That is
Islam.
correct. No,
And
you are
so they were
absolutely correct.
trying to delineate and just say, "Hey, this isn't a holy war, guys." You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
okay. So I think that's an
No, 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 that's
important.
great. I'm glad you brought that back up because I skipped over that. But yeah, you're
No,
absolutely true. That could be a third intention in him
sure.
translating it in that way was not
Mhm.
to incite a war. They're trying to stop imminent war if this doesn't get settled. So you're absolutely correct.
So,
Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
sure, absolutely. So, one of the most frustrating things that you hear when you live in this era that we're in American history is this insistence to. It is unbelievable the amount of gymnastics that are performed to try to make sure that we connect everything to the phrase separation of church and state, separation
Mhm.
between church and state.
Yeah, yeah,
Can you please, because this audience is smart, okay? I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
they understand. They
Oh, I'm sure they do.
understand the letter with the Anabaptists and all this stuff. Okay, they know that, but I want you to walk us through for someone that's watching right now that will make that argument or say it offhand and just shut down a conversation or have someone in their life do that to them. What is the retort to that? Because it's one of the most bastardized phrases in American history.
Yes, the separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state.
Yeah, you know, yeah, separation of church and state. Yeah, there were a group of ministers from the Baptist Church in Danbury, and this is not too long after the ratification of the Constitution, and they were concerned that the United States government was going to do what countries such as England and others had done, and that's institute, a national religion and or prevent people from freely worshiping as they choose to. So they sent this letter to Thomas Jefferson with, I mean, it's a beautiful letter, really. There's such eloquence back then. I wish we had that now.
Right.
Um,
No, we're too busy using emojis and using letters for words like you.
yeah,
We can't type out YOU. You're just
yeah.
getting the letter U and our correspondence. Oh, I'm with you 100%, man.
Um, but they say that we know that you are a man who God has put in this position, and He has put you there for a reason. We know that there are reasons, and we trust God for those reasons. But we want to clarify with you: will the government be impeding or interfering with how we practice our faith? And that's it in a nutshell. I'd have to find. I've got it here in my paper somewhere, but
Hmm.
I don't know if you want me to spend time actually reading it. But um, so Jefferson replies with beautiful sentiments
Equal
about.
eloquence.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Oh,
Equal
equal.
eloquence to
Yes,
the letter
yes.
that he received. Yes.
Oh yeah, just absolutely beautiful language. Um, and he basically just said no. That is not the purpose of the government. We are not here to establish a religion. We are not here to impose any restrictions upon anyone who wishes to believe as they believe and practice as they practice. He
And
said
let's
that
just
is,
stop right there for just a second,
yeah, yeah,
because
no problem.
that's what the, and I wish I had the can you Google, I want to make sure there. Hang on a second. I want to
I've
get
got,
this
yeah,
absolutely right here because we're all about accuracy. First Amendment. Okay, let's see. The text of the First Amendment. Congress, I mean, this is the first part of the
mhm,
First Amendment.
yeah,
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. He doesn't
right.
say that religion has no place in our country, which
No,
many people try to say. It's it's saying that Congress can't make a law that forces you. And again, context matters. What
yeah,
was happening in England? What were the founding fathers trying to get away from? And that was an established church,
right,
the
right,
Church of England. Does it ring a bell with anyone?
yeah,
So, uh, so it's so important to know this context and to actually extrapolate the entire thought, not just separation of church and state. No, Thomas Jefferson was talking about a wall of separation between
right,
church and state, to the point that you are making, Matt, and that no, we're not going to interfere with the way you practice your faith. That's what he was saying. He wasn't
absolutely,
saying that there is no role for religion in our society and any kind of connection to the government. It's that the government isn't going to impose its will on you.
correct, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's frustrating.
Um,
It's
they
frustrating.
did, they do not, they never have said that religion has no part in this country. They, and even at that too, I kind of find it interesting. That they don't even feel that they have to mention God. There's no
Mhm.
reference to God not being, established under any sort of a law. He's not being barred from any sort of a law. We're not barring him from the government.
Mhm.
We're not barring him from the government. They do not leave any wording in there at all that would remove God from what they are trying to do by keeping God in the country. That's how I look at it. Now, of course, that could be my interpretation of it, but I think that it's really interesting that they mentioned religion. They didn't mention God.
Mhm. Well, no, that's fair. And also what that does, in my opinion, is by specifically saying Congress shall make no law.
Right. Right.
It's not saying the states can't. I mean, it's talking specifically about the Congress. I mean, you could, if you wanted to play parsing of the words, you could
Yeah.
almost say, well, that still leaves it open for the state uh, uh,
And
government bodies, which
yeah, and
they
there
did
were,
write in their constitutions.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there were Thomas Jefferson even kind of toyed with it in the very beginning about having a church for the state of Virginia. Then he thought better of it and he changed course on it. He decided, no, that's too much. That's too close to that violation of the of the law in the
Mhm.
Constitution. So it's better still to leave people up to their own approach to that. Now, can you have a religious college, university in your state? Absolutely. You can teach it in an institution. It's being taught in our schools. God is being taught. There were universities that were established as a school of divinity. Harvard, Yale, Princeton.
I know.
You know,
To think of the origins of those
yeah.
schools
I mean, that's what those
compared
that's
to
what those
today.
those universities were for. They were turning out pastors for specific religions. They weren't, practice. Um, they weren't just going there and learning about God and then going out on their own. They were there to represent a denomination. And a lot of people forget that or don't know it.
I'm telling you, Matt, nothing says the path America has taken as a nation more clearly than Harvard University.
Oh, I
I
know.
mean, you look at its origins, like you said, we're training up pastors to today, and we are, so we're storming buildings. We're
Yeah. No.
you fill in the blank. We're protesting, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And it's just like 180 degrees from where that school started. That's America in a nutshell, right there, as far as I'm
Oh,
concerned.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can go
You
into
want
a
to look at
long
the health
discussion.
of the United States of America? Just do a snapshot of Harvard University, and it just told you how the rest of the country is doing
Oh, I know.
and
But,
what track
you
they're
know,
on.
given I'll take Harvard since we're talking about Harvard. I know the other ones are getting the same kind of thing, but um, I was doing some research recently. 2021, $625 million of taxpayer money went to Harvard, I
You're
believe.
gonna make me mad. You're gonna make me really angry, man.
I believe so. 'Cause I
Yeah.
actually that points back to what you were talking about earlier with Oklahoma, because I live
Mhm.
close to Oklahoma, and I
Mhm.
was in discussion with somebody, and they were bringing that up about putting religion in school. I said, well, you got Harvard University started as a school of divinity, and we're giving them $625 million a year, or at least for that one year.
Where's my separation of church and state in that?
I know it's gone, and they've got a $50 billion endowment, that they're sitting on, and they're
Uh,
bleeding money, so they need 625 million of ours.
uh-huh. Yeah. It's interesting, huh? Isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Like you said, it's the gymnastics, that they play.
I'm just looking here. Talk to us about this section in the book that deals with the state constitutions and why those are so important to our history. Because whoo, you want to talk about references to God,
Yeah,
right?
that came about because before this book was actually written, I was gathering research. I didn't know I was gathering research, for this book. Became the research. People were talking about um, the different states,
Hmm.
and it fell back to religion about God. Um, we can't have God in our schools, and that's when we found the God in education part of it. But then I got to thinking, I wonder what their Constitution says, if it says anything at all about God, because state constitutions cannot violate the U.S. Constitution. And so I went through each of the 50 states, and um, I don't have an exact number. There, I believe, is somewhere around 40. Some of them make an outright direct reference in their preamble
Yeah,
to we are establishing this state in the name of God Almighty.
yeah.
And
Just I mean, just
because God gave us this privilege of choosing our own form of government, I'm reading
mhm.
Arkansas right here, for
Yeah,
our civil and religious liberty, and desiring to perpetuate its blessings and secure the same for ourselves and posterity. And they do ordain, which ordain has a specific meaning as well, and establish this constitution. They ordained their constitution in the name of Almighty God. Now,
yes.
some people, well, they're a
And
bunch of redneck uh, slave owners. Um,
uh-huh.
so, I mean, we can go to, I can pull it up here. We can go to a northern state if you want to, and they say the same things.
No,
There's only,
well, before you get to your northern state, I was just cross-referencing from the book to this because unless otherwise noted, correct me if I'm wrong, in the book, when you go state by state with it's beautifully done. You've got each state and then their references to God, then the next state and so on and so forth. Um, unless otherwise noted, like I saw, for example, like Vermont, it says the Vermont 1786, blah blah blah. But if it's just the state, Matt, that's currently in their constitution, correct?
yeah, correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I didn't go back to the year that they were that the state was, ratified into
No,
the
no, no, no.
union.
And I'm just
Yeah.
making sure. So unless
No.
otherwise
Yeah, I know
noted,
what you. Yeah, I understand
yeah.
you.
So if it's just the state and then the reference to God, that's still current today. In other words, California, listen up. This is in the state of California's
California.
Constitution
Yeah, I
today.
love it.
We,
I
the
love it.
people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, in order to secure and perpetuate its blessings, do establish this Constitution. My goodness, California, dust off your Constitution and make sure that
Well,
you're okay with that. Because boy, when they
yeah.
find out what their Constitution says, they're going to be offended.
Well, they
But
asked me, which God? That's what they asked me.
okay. Okay. But yeah, I mean, you just scroll through here. And like you
Yeah.
said, almost every single state today has a reference to God in its constitution. And
Yes.
my goodness, I'm just looking for the most overt one that I don't know. I mean, they're all pretty standard as far as grateful to Almighty God.
Yes.
It's just, but you're right. That's probably their out right there. Oh, look at that, Minnesota. Heads up.
Oh yeah.
Grateful
Minnesota
to
and
God for our
Wisconsin.
civil and religious liberty. Ooh.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, this is so great. This is just awesome. All these references.
Well, and
Uh,
yeah, and that's why I thought is important, because we're talking about continuity and consistency throughout. So you're not having different parts of the country picking and choosing that they don't want to abide by the founding principles of this country when they were established as a state, and like you said, even up to today. Because if, say, for California, they don't want God in their constitution, all they have to do is go back and remove him from the
Go ahead.
preamble. That's
Yep.
all they got to
You
do.
have that freedom. You have that
Yeah.
right.
But nobody's even made that move. As radical as anybody has ever been in the governorship, nobody has ever made that move.
Oh, it's fascinating, man.
I don't know. Maybe I'll stir up a whole bunch of states wanting to take God out of their constitution now. But
So, what is the what's the story behind "In God We Trust"?
because people always go back to that. Well, it was never said "In God We Trust," but that came about during the Civil War in 1864. I think Glenn's talked about this on his show, where Lincoln he kind of turned a corner on why they were fighting the Civil War between states, because the Union was getting pounded. I mean, they couldn't win a battle no matter how far they outnumbered the Confederacy. They could not win. And I remember Glenn telling the story, talking about how Lincoln, I guess, went to his cabinet and said that we are going to fight this for the right reason, and that is to free the slaves. So we need to trust in God that he will help us do that and to put an end to this once and for all. Because also going back in history, and we can talk about that too later, there were several of the founding fathers that did want to get rid of slavery, Jefferson and Washington included. But anyway, so they wanted it to be known throughout the Union that they were trusting in God during this time. So they came up with the idea of stamping coinage and having it printed on paper bills that "In God We Trust." And that's what they did. And if you notice, from about 1863, 1864, the United States started to turn a corner on the Civil War. Around the time that they made this decision that we are going to turn to God, we haven't been doing this the way we should be. We haven't been fighting it for the right reasons. We're fighting our own brothers and sisters. We're tearing each other apart. We're killing each other. We're decimating, homes and families and cities. And we need to have God. We need to be on God's side. You can't have God on your side. You have to be on God's side. So you have to be doing it for the right reasons. So we are going to trust in God that he will lead us how to resolve this once and for all, and come back together as a union, that they're no longer be a confederacy. They're no longer, be a separation between two countries like that. And unfortunately, Lincoln, was assassinated because his, rebuilding of the South and the unity of the nation. It was all about forgiveness. It was all about forgiveness and welcoming your brother and your sister back into each other's arms, saying, "Don't worry about what we were fighting about. It's over with. It's done. We need to be a country again." And that is an essence of what Jesus Christ has taught. No matter what your brother has done to you, no matter what you've done to them, you need to be able to come together in a spirit of forgiveness and be brother and sister again and no longer fight about this. And that was the whole point behind that.
So you mentioned the Civil War and "In God We Trust" coming out of that. Let's go back to the Revolutionary War and the importance. See, that's the thing that I think people, when we want to talk about context and were the founders Christians, did they believe in God? I mean, these are the same guys who were in charge during the Revolutionary War, before they established the government under the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
They were the guys who fought in the actual Revolutionary War, and their faith in God was demonstrated time and time and time again. You alluded to, or I guess in our conversation earlier today, we talked about the miracles that they attributed during the Civil War. I mean, just one that comes off the top of my head was the fog that allowed them to escape there in New York. I mean, that just was so. Anyhow, they believed in divine intervention and believed that God was on their side during the Revolutionary War. So of course they're going to have this demonstrative faith in him. But talk to us about how they viewed God, even when they were fighting for the revolution.
Well, let's see.
Because I mean that's a whole separate. You've got
that's
that's part 8, I think it is, in your book. I mean, you cover a lot of ground in this thing.
Yeah. Well, I go back and I pulled out, found them through my research, through the I believe it's the Library of Congress. Went back and pulled up all these proclamations that they issued during the war. And there's one other part of that too that we haven't talked about yet, but they needed Bibles in the American colonies, and they got their Bibles from England. And so Congress, a gentleman named I forget his first name, but the Aiken Bible, came forward and said, "I'll print a Bible." And he came up with a copy of the Bible, and they said, "It looks good to us. Go ahead and print it, and we'll distribute it through the colonies." And it's actually a book that Washington said that if he had been able to get a hold of basically wagon loads of them, he would have given one to every soldier in the American Army, because again they wanted to be on God's side. Now we can talk about the people will distract from that by, well, you're killing each other, you're doing this and that. Well, that wasn't how they wanted to do it. But anyway, so they would rather have just hey, let us, because that was part of the appeal in the beginning. Just let us go. Just let us go. We don't want to be a part of you anymore. We don't want to fight you. But King George III said no. But here, one way I'll jump into that is this is in 1813. Long after all that. Of course, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had a falling out over some different things. Didn't speak to each other for years. And this is again a reference to forgiveness, practicing the principles that they learned with Christianity. Is that, you know what? We have fought. We have said terrible things about each other publicly. Let's forgive and forget and be friends again. So anyway,
And shout out to Dr. Benjamin Rush for getting those two guys
oh
to
yeah,
start
yeah,
writing each other again. And
yeah.
by the way, I want you to continue, but I have to point out one of the most, and you can attribute this to God or whatever. It just, for me, it speaks volumes about how special this nation is and its connection to God, in the simple fact that 50 years to the day from the signing of the Declaration of Independence to their
Mhm.
deaths, 50 years to the day, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams pass away on July 4th, 1826. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just, what
yeah.
are those odds, man? Anyway, I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah, you know, that's that's not that's a I don't even know what kind of a odds you could give that. You
Right.
know, I mean, that's beyond infinite odds.
I'm
But yeah,
sorry to interrupt you on that. I mean,
no, no,
so
no, no, no. That's okay.
yeah,
We're okay.
continue
Um,
on the
but
early
yeah,
stages of founders.
you talked about their feeling about God during the American Revolution. So I'm going to begin that with pointing out John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Um, in particular, in 1813, they had a letter exchange that was going on back. Sometimes they were writing so many letters, they would get two letters on the same day talking about different things.
I
Um,
have
so,
that book over there too.
so I mean, you're talking about some fast and furious letter writing.
Hmm.
Um,
There's no
uh,
emails, y'all. There's no
no, no
telephone.
email,
You're
no.
just right send, right send. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, and you're talking about from Massachusetts down to Virginia too.
And that's the
So
thing. We're getting so much insight from the personal correspondence
yeah,
uh, of two of the greatest minds to ever exist. And meanwhile, you and I live in an era where, yeah, we'll send a text with an emoji
yeah,
and, you know,
yeah,
be done.
yeah. Just think about if they had what we had now, and none of this was being written down. You know,
I'm telling you, I stand by this right now. Benjamin Franklin, thank God he was around when he was. But if that man had Twitter, it would be the most epic. Him and Thomas Jefferson would have the most epic Twitter profiles ever. Anyway, continue.
yeah, no, no, that's you're right. I never thought about that. Um, but anyway, yeah, Adams and Jefferson had this exchange about the founding of the country and different things about the attitudes and the what were we working for, what we not wanting to have a part of the country, what were all these different things. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of quote Adams here real quick. And this is in my book. You can check it. It's actually in the National Archives. It's John Adams' letter to Thomas Jefferson on June the 28th, 1813, which, if I remember right, um, kind of a side note here, Benjamin Franklin, because you mentioned Benjamin Franklin, I believe it was on June 28th, 1787, that Franklin, who has long been called the deist, who was as a teenager, um, stood up before the Constitutional Convention and said that I have lived a long time. Again, I'm paraphrasing. Never before have I ever seen the hand of God in this room with this group of individuals, and basically that we need to pray to God for His guidance
Hmm.
in constructing this Constitution, that it be the right way, done the right way, with the right attitude. So anyway, that was not that I find when
No,
I looked in my
it's
notes.
very
I mean,
important.
you're talking
Yeah.
about 26 year 20. There's a 26 again. 26 years
Hmm.
later.
Oh, right, right. But I mean that's very important, because I mean, early on in this conversation today, we talked about how, look, everybody goes through life, with you're up and down with your faith, or
Sure.
where exactly you are in your walk. And it just seems like with the founders, when push came to shove, they all kind of fell on the side of God in the end.
Oh yeah, yeah. You don't see anywhere one of them have ever you talked about doubting your faith. They, in all the correspondence that I have found, they were upbeat about it,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah,
is surprising when you look at the times. All these
that's
men were
interesting. Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
threat of losing their lives, their livelihood, their homes, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. That'd be really hard. I have to admit. I don't know how I'd be about it if I knew
Mm-hmm.
any moment that an army could march down the street, burn my house down, and hang me from the tree in my front yard. You know.
Yeah.
Um, but
No,
anyway,
that's
they were.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just
N-
I'll go
No,
ahead and
great
jump to
point.
this. I don't want to confuse people too much jumping around on my part.
You're good.
But anyway, so Adams says to Thomas Jefferson, the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the only principles in which that beautiful assembly of young gentlemen could unite. And these principles only could be intended by them in their address or by me in my answer. And what were these general principles? I answer the general principles of Christianity, in all which all sects are united. So it's not one sect of a religious belief independently. They came together in spite of maybe their different views on what the Bible says and what God said. Okay.
Right.
So he goes on, in which that beautiful assembly young gentlemen could unite. General principles of Christianity in which all sects were united, and the general principles of English and American liberty in which all those young men united, and which had united all parties in America in majorities sufficient to assert and maintain their independence. And he goes on to say that he vows that he believes that those general principles of Christianity are eternal and immutable as existence and attributes of God, and that those principles of liberty are unalterable as human nature. And he goes on to talk about
And remind us, who was that you were quoting?
That's John Adams to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
And I followed up with the letter because I wanted to see what Jefferson said about that, because people talked about his objection to God.
Mm-hmm.
He never said anything negative about that. I could not find anything, at least. If he did, the letter's missing. I never found the letter where he pushed back on Adams with that.
Right.
Said, no, that's not right. I don't agree with that. He never did that, as far as I can find.
And I mean, that's the other thing, John Adams. I mean, John Adams' quotes on God, they're so eloquent. And he talks about, the Constitution's written for a moral people. I mean,
yeah.
It just says,
yeah.
okay.
Well, if you don't have those morals, you cannot fulfill the intent and design of that Constitution.
And see, this is the thing when you talk about the way America is set up and where our rights come from, you can have this conversation with someone that doesn't believe in God, but they have to come to some sort of conclusion about where our rights come from. So those that believe in God and the natural law, if you want to unravel the United States of America and its governing constitution and the rights that it protects for us, those rights have to come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would contend that someone who believes in God, as you've been establishing for the better part of the last hour and a half here, that the founders knew that these rights came from God. And so that's what this document does. It enshrines those rights, and it empowers governments to protect those rights for us. So if you're talking to someone who has the freedom to not believe in God, and that's fine. That's the beauty of America.
It is.
You
absolutely.
do have to ask them, okay, so you agree though with me that we have these rights, and you agree with me that the Constitution protects these rights. And I think that they would say, yes, we have them. Yes, they're protected by the Constitution. Okay, well, then where do they come from? And they don't have to believe in God, But you have to make sure that if you don't believe in God and you still believe that these rights are worth protecting, they have to have a source. So where is that source? And so help me, if their response is the government, then they have completely negated their entire argument up to that point.
Oh, absolutely.
So I mean, you can say natural law, huh? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I would say no. You're right. As we've all heard many, many times over, the government can give it to you; they can take it away.
Yes, exactly.
But I don't want to jump down too far of a rabbit hole. But you were talking about the origin of these natural laws. There are people who say that they come from. It was a king, I believe his name was Hammurabi or Rabi.
Hammurabi Code. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I researched that too. It's not in my book. They cannot carbon test with any accuracy within, I think, like 1,500 years.
Okay.
That of its when it was dated. They cannot date it, so they can't accurately say. So for anyone who says, well, that come from Hammurabi, which predates Moses. So Moses, because I've had people tell me Moses got those from him, but there's like 110 those laws, something like that. But anyway, we do not have the technology that can definitively carbon date that within something like 1,500 or 2,000 years. So they can't even say we can't even, they can't even use that argument accurately. People try for anything to discredit this, but I just want to emphasize that aside, this is where they got this stuff from God. They didn't go to Aristotle. They didn't go to Plato. Matter of fact, Jefferson, when he talks about his wee little book, which is the Philosophy of Jesus of Nazareth, it's not the Jefferson Bible, he refers to Platonists as basically being those who oppose him for his beliefs. So a Platonistic, that's more in the line of practicing. It kind of melted down from what I read from it. It kind of had God in it, and then it just slowly melted into paganism before they finally just took God out of it. But anyway, Jefferson refers to and he refers, I believe, to the deists in that same letter as well, saying that they won't have any part of me because I believe that I'm a true Christian because I choose to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. And they won't have any part of me. He actually referred. Yeah, he says that they call him an infidel, or that they would.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's good stuff, man. And this is, I mean, you chronicle this all throughout the book.
That's the thing too. I didn't add it in earlier. One of the things that I learned, I was telling you earlier, that I took a class in historical research methods. You have to be able to put yourself in their mind. It's like a forensic. You have these forensic investigators that analyze criminals. These men weren't criminals, but you know what I'm saying. You have
I
to
understand.
get in their mind to understand their methods, how they think, why they thought it, why did they do this, why didn't they do that. So you have to be able to put yourself in there. And I'm not an expert at it, but I believe that I was, to a certain extent, able to put myself into their mind, and be able to understand where they were coming from, and then to be able to go back, find out where they came from at that point, and then how they went ahead from that point.
It cannot be overstated. Context matters, and that's something that the book does a great job with. So, like, I guess can I take you to
go wherever you want.
Section 9 here, where the title of this section is a question, and it's the only part of the book, part 9. It's the only part whose title is a question. So what's your elevator pitch? Let me ask you that, Matt. You get on the elevator, someone says, "Oh, Oh, you're Matt Clark. You wrote The Founding Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles. So, Matt, is the United States of America a Christian nation? You're on the elevator, Matt. How do you, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I did not tell Matt I was going to ask him this question. But I just noticed while we were sitting here, I just noticed, now wait a minute, part 9's the only part of the book where that ends in a question mark there, you know.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna ask him.
Mhm.
What's the short answer to that? Like, how do you convince somebody?
Oh boy, you did put me on a spot.
I did.
I'm just kidding. No,
You know
it's
what you say? Here's what you say: read my book.
no. I'm teasing. I'm a teaser. I'm teasing you. No, I would go. I go back. I can. That's the thing about this book. You can go forward in it, and you can go backwards, and it still says the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go to that point, and I would say, let's look at the beginning, and let's look at the documents. Okay, here they are. They're calling upon God for help. They call themselves Christians. Here we have treaties where they signed, the Congress ratified, that says this is a Christian nation. We are at peace now with this Christian nation. We will not violate, this agreement. May God help us all keep this agreement. Go forward to the Civil War, like you were talking about, the In God We Trust. Why that was at that point added to the coinage.
Mm.
Then we can go forward, because I was referencing your 1895 book. They got the Holy Trinity Church versus the U.S. in the SCOTUS decision, where one of the judges, and that's what I love about it too, because I always talk about the Supreme Court gets to interpret the Constitution, except when it quote unquote interprets it the way they don't want it to. But this decision, there is no dissonance in these declarations. There is a universal language pervading them, all having one meaning. They affirm and reaffirm that this is a Christian nation. They are organic utterances. They speak the voice of the entire people. I mean, it's almost like preparing to go into court, and you're having to defend your client who is absolutely innocent of what they're being accused of. And you have to gather all of this evidence together, and you have to put it all together. You have to sift through it. You've got to match it up.
That's a good point. That's actually a very good point. And I don't want that to get lost here. There is such an overwhelming amount of evidence that points to the Christian principles being the bedrock of the founding of this nation, the reliance on God and God's protection. It's I mean, hell, it's a book. It's a book worth of that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're trying to make the counter argument, you are taking stuff, little out of context references here and there, and you're making memes about them and saying, "Ha ha! See, totally not a Christian nation." And you've got a handful of out of context things where compared to this stack of in context sources, it's a mountain versus a few things here and there, and so it's pretty clear to me.
I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think you and your listeners would probably know what forces behind that. Because what you want to talk about disinformation and confusion.
You got to manipulate. You got to obscure. You've got to confuse. I totally understand. Shall we tackle the preamble and posterity now?
Absolutely.
Part 10 of your book.
Yeah.
Again, the book is available at Amazon. It's The Founding Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles. Matt Clark, the author, continuing our conversation. So let's talk about that part 10, the preamble and posterity.
Absolutely.
It's pretty
Okay.
heady.
There's a
this
lot
one, there.
This one was a lot of digging. It really was. So basically, what this part of my book is about, it has to do with posterity, which is about future generations. Of course, in the Constitution, it says that they establish this Constitution to protect our rights and establish these freedoms for us and for our posterity, which means future generations. Okay, so what's a future generation? That's those who are not yet born. So this one really gets people mad at me.
Oh, hold on. I like this. I like this setup. So we're getting into territory where the author, the guest here, this sets people off. Oh, I'm here for this. Let's go.
Yeah, I've actually gotten some threats over this one, over this part of my book. Anyway,
wow.
Okay. So I dug again all the way back into my primary sources. I found men such as James Wilson, who was a pre-constitutional scholar. He was a scholar in Constitution before they even authored the Constitution. He was one of the signers. He was considered a preeminent expert on natural law. And actually, I haven't confirmed it, but I've read sources that said that Madison, Washington, and others actually went to his lectures at law school from time to time when they could. They like to hear him speak about the laws, about how these laws are. That's intimidating.
If I'm a professor, right, or if I'm teaching a class, and all of a sudden I see it's being audited in the back by George Washington, Thomas Jefferson.
Can you imagine?
I'm nervous.
I'm
stuttering.
Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, and Madison, Alexander Hamilton come in and sit down. Almost sounds like a joke.
Don't screw this up. This is your chance, man. Okay.
But anyway, this is about the sanctity of life. And that's why I went back in the sanctity about abortion and how abortion never has been constitutional.
Yeah. And before you get in this, and I'm gonna let you talk.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
What
set it up?
Yeah. So this is that's one thing that you always hear that. Well, the founding fathers never talked about abortion. They throw out this canard that this is like, it was never even addressed or whatever. But you're about to lay out the case that it absolutely was addressed by them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was, well, we can go back to James Wilson, like I was saying, who my understanding is there came a later judge named Joseph Story, who was basically, he was kind of mentored, I believe, either by James Wilson directly or mentored by his teachings. But James Wilson wrote an essay, and this is around the time of the Constitution. It was called "The Natural of the Natural Rights of Individuals," and he did address the sanctity of life. If I can just quote him here real quick. With consistency, beautiful and undeviating human life, from its commencement to its close, is protected by the common law. In the contemplation of law, life begins when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. By the law, life is protected not only from immediate destruction, but from every degree of actual violence, and in some cases from every degree of danger. Okay, so when I got that, again, I went back to the dictionary, more than one of that time period. I looked up the word stir. What did they mean by stir at that time? Well, stir meant a mixing. Okay, so I don't want to do a graphic sexual thing here, but we all know what happens. We all know what happens when
I'm going to start mixing that word into my conversation. Stir.
Okay, yeah, stir means a lot of, because people say, "Oh, that means the baby's turning inside the mother." Well, yes, but there's also a stirring which is called mixture. So you've got the fertile female egg,
That's
the
interesting.
male sperm. They mix. That's how
Yeah. And again, the
reproduction.
guy who
I mean,
is
that's science.
so
If
you're
people
leaning
want to
on
argue, I'm
the
sorry.
dictionary definitions. You're leaning on the dictionary definitions at the
Right.
time from a guy who this is the guy who was the professor guy that we were
Mhm.
just referring
Well,
to.
yeah, James
That the
Wilson.
founding fathers like to tune into his
Lectures on the law. Yeah.
lectures. That's
He was also on the Supreme Court as well.
wow. So that's
So,
interesting.
yeah. So,
Clearly an awareness of life at conception back in the
well,
late 1700s.
when
I'm
when I was
stirring. I'm sorry, I said.
no, yeah, no, it's fine. When I was doing this research, I would test it on people, and I had this been several years ago now. Is when I probably 10, 12 years ago, and a woman told me, she said they didn't know how pregnancies came about back then. They didn't know how a woman became with child, as you would say, back then. They didn't know how that happened. I'm thinking, well, then how did they know how to do the, you know, the act of it that leads to creation? But so anyway, he spoke about the common law. So I went back to the common law with William Blackstone.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so William Blackstone in 1771 said this about it: the immediate gift of God, a right inherent by nature in every individual, and it begins in contemplation of law. As soon as an infant is able to stir in the mother's womb, for if a woman is quick with child, and by a potion or otherwise kills it in the womb, for if anyone beat her whereby the child dies in her body, and she is delivered of a dead child, this was by the ancient law homicide or manslaughter.
Wow, man.
So I went to the dictionaries from then and now to look up the definitions of these words as they were meant then and meant now.
Sure.
So what is homicide was then? That was the taking of a life. Manslaughter, taking of a life. What is the definition of abortion? If people go in and they actually look up the legal definition of abortion, it is the ending of a life. It's not a medical procedure. It's not, it's not woman's health. It's the ending of a life. Now, I understand the extenuating circumstances where people would need to have a procedure done. I understand that. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing just the blatant disregard for human life and violating the Constitution to do it. So that's what this section is about. So I go in and I break everything down. I go back to the common law, to the law that we applied as the founding fathers did through time. I use the language that they used to find out what they meant, cross-reference it with our language that we use now. And it all means the same thing. It means that it's a violation of human life. So I went into the Constitution as well. This is a pretty big one. I mean, I probably have to be teaching a law class to really dig into it, because I had to go into not only the Constitution, but I had to go into the Federalist Papers.
All right, here we go.
So
I was wondering if we were going to hear a reference from
yeah, I almost left that out, unfortunately.
And you keep while you keep presenting, I'm looking up something that don't let me forget to come back and address here.
No, that's fine. But I do want to reemphasize on the preamble, just for your listeners.
Yes, please.
Joseph's commentary on the U.S. Constitution from 1833, in its section 459, the word maxim, because people say that the preamble has no authority in the Constitution. It doesn't mean anything. It's just words at the beginning of it, which is amazing that they would say that, because
you throw it away. I don't understand that.
That means, okay, the justice and the fairness and the general welfare and the liberty, okay, then that doesn't mean anything to you then.
Right.
You know, like you said, it's gymnastics. But James Story, who was a judge, he was an authority on constitutional law. He referred to the word maxim as it's defined as a succinct formulation of fundamental principle. It's general truth or rule of conduct. So that's what a preamble is. And he also goes on to say that a preamble is as much a part of the Constitution as the words in of it itself. So the preamble does carry weight in the Constitution. It's there for a reason. It has strength and power of its own. It establishes what comes afterwards. If you didn't have a preamble to a document, you know, it doesn't establish what the purpose of that document is, what is in it, what is not in it, and so forth. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Have you found what you're looking for yet?
Yeah, I'm looking here because Heather picked up on something you said as well, and I had never thought of this. Women used to drink things to end their child's life because you talked about the potion reference there, and I was looking up and I'm finding something along those lines about herbs and stuff. My gosh, man, I didn't realize that I always just assumed that it would have to have been a physical
They would,
something either internal or external harming the child, ending the life. I didn't realize that you could.
Well, I had an activist. I'm sorry if I could just interject. I had an activist from Oregon who's desperately pro-abortion. Said, well, Benjamin Franklin, he provided in one of his pamphlets a recipe for an abortion potion. And of course, I'd never heard of this, so I went and looked it up, and he reprinted. Basically, what it was a pamphlet for farmers in the community, had different things in it. He got it from another gentleman whose name I just don't remember right now. I was going to pull that off to the side so I'd have it. But anyway, that pamphlet did have a potion for abortion in it. Ben Franklin took that pamphlet, updated it, and he removed that section. He took out the potion for an abortion. So when he printed it, the one that he wrote, he printed, removed the abortion. So clearly he did not want that in his pamphlet. He did not want people practicing that. Now, I don't know what his thought was exactly on abortion, but I find it interesting that instead of leaving it in there, because if they all thought that if he believed that it was a necessary thing that people should just be able to do, he would have left it in that pamphlet, because he left everything else. He just kind of updated things to bring it up to the current time.
I'm just I am listening to you.
See,
you know, this is the problem with you. See, because you come up with all this fascinating information that we want to explore and explore more, which of course can be found in your book. But I'm finding this thing about this guy who,
I don't want, because people say, well, I cherry picked everything out of it. Well, that's a lot of cherries for one thing,
right?
But I gave them all of the sources. They can find the ugly stuff too, but it doesn't take away from this.
Here's how serious they took abortion back then. As I'm quickly just learning this story here about this Dr. John Hollowell, found guilty under English common law, the high-handed misdemeanor of endeavoring to destroy Sarah Grosvenor's health and, quote, the fruit of her womb. And he was they had a rope around his neck. Let's see here. He was in the gallows for 2 hours. He was to be whipped 29 times on a bare back and returned to prison. But he escaped before they could carry it out. He escaped to Rhode Island. Rhode Island, what is up, man? Rhode Island. So
yeah, not much different than they are now, probably.
No. Fascinating stuff. My goodness.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to. Did you want me to include my part about the 14th Amendment, because that's what they used to justify it? Do you mind if I touch on that real quick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Yep.
Because they fall back to the 14th Amendment, saying that that's a right to abort your child, which doesn't say that, of course. But again, this is where a lack of education, unfortunately, in this country, proper education causes a lot of us to fall short. This is an education on, the proper use in structuring a sentence. It's not taught what a semicolon, I guess, is for anymore. But anyway, in the 14th Amendment, it says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens, because they say it's in the womb, it's not a citizen.
Right.
Okay. So, we can go off on the baby thing there. But anyway, but it has a semicolon after citizens of the United States, which a semicolon stays in the same area of topic, but it changes the thought a little bit. It's kind of like a side note. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. And that's where I went back into the Federalist Papers to find out exactly how strong were the powers of the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went into there and went into the Federalist Papers, and it should be Federalist Paper 39, where they wrote that yes, the court can interpret the Constitution, but within the fundamental intent and design of the Constitution. So when you look at that, you go back to the preamble, you go to the 14th Amendment, you go to the sections where the articles where they outline the laws, who makes laws, who signs them in the law, so forth. But anyway, there was a very key thing in that Federalist paper. It says it equally proves that though individual oppression may now and then proceed from the courts, oppression from the courts of justice, the general liberty of people can never be endangered but from that quarter. So no matter what, the Constitution prohibits the Supreme Court from infringing on human rights. So they couldn't make a law. They couldn't, even though they can't make a law, they couldn't make the law. So basically what my argument, I'll kind of
until 1973.
Yeah. It's I'm sorry, I said 39. It's Federalist Paper 78.
I'm not kidding you. I almost went over here. I was like, wait a minute. I know that. I think that was 78. Not because I knew it was 78,
no.
because I saw it in your book.
Yeah.
That's where I learned that. And I almost went to just double check. I was like, let it go.
Yeah, I'm
no,
sorry.
I learned that from your book. It's so great, man.
I mean, awesome. They talk about how the legislature commands the purse. They control all of these things. The courts are actually the weakest. It says this in the Federalist paper. Mm-hmm. The courts are the weakest branch of the government. And they did that so that they can't come out and say, okay, yeah, I know what all these politicians and what the citizens say, but we say this, and we say the Constitution says this. So that's why we're doing it.
You just gave me a great idea. That would be a great At the Mic deep dive. It's just a conversation about the evolution of the role of the courts in our country for 2.5 centuries. Because, oh my gosh, you want to talk about something. We talked about Harvard earlier, how it's gone 180 degrees from being a place where we're training up future religious leaders and pastors to today, where it's like you couldn't get further off on the horizon
Yeah.
from where it began. And so I think our courts are actually, we could do this all day. You could look
Yeah.
at anything in the founding and look at it today, and it just really shows you the not evolution, but devolution of this
Oh,
country
yeah.
in many respects. So I need to get somebody on here
Yeah, no, that's fine.
to talk. No, what I'm saying is to just do a show just about the
Oh,
courts,
oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
and what's happened to them.
We were, as a nation, we need to really start looking at these things
Mhm.
and educating ourselves. Like I said, I didn't know this stuff until I researched it,
Sure, sure.
you know?
Well,
Um, and again, I was asking questions like the founders asked questions. I tried to
yeah,
at least. And that's what motivated me to find these things. I found things that I didn't like, but most of the things that I found were things that I knew had to be true,
mhm.
but I needed the documents to prove it. And I found the documents.
That's so awesome, and they're contained
Yeah.
in your book, The Founding Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on
Yeah.
God and Christian principles. I think you should order it right now at Amazon, and I think you need to absorb it before Thanksgiving. So when you're sitting at the Thanksgiving table, Lord only knows what your conversations are going to be like in your houses following this election. But if the Constitution comes up, you can be completely prepared. I know that you have a Facebook page.
Yes.
That
And
you
it's,
that Yeah, talk to us about
yeah,
that.
I'm going to say, yeah, I do have a Facebook page. And it's titled after my book, The Founding Fathers, What Did They Really Say? And I go on there periodically and post things about the founding fathers. A lot of it's kind of just educational and a reminder. It's material from my book, such as when Thanksgiving's coming up, I always put a Thanksgiving proclamation from one of the founders in there,
Oh
which,
gosh,
by the
that makes
way,
heads explode.
by the way,
I mean, George Washington one will make people's heads explode. But continue, yeah.
well, I was going to say, people say, well, that was then. So I went back, found Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. They all acknowledge the same thing. They acknowledge that the founders looked upon God,
Yeah.
as the foundation of this country. So yeah,
Good stuff.
I
That's awesome.
I try not to get a thrill out of doing that to people, but from time to time, you know, it's nice
No, that's
to be able to have an answer for them. And that's the thing about this book. It's kind of a reference book in a way, but it's not a history book. It's a book filled with information that's primary source. It's all primary source. It's documented. You can go in from the bibliography. You can look in and look it all up. You can even further educate yourself. So the reader who gets this book, they can go into the different websites like the National Archives and these places, and they can start looking around in there. Some people may not even know these websites exist for them to use. The Yale Law University, the Avalon Project, got tons of documents, not just related to the United States, but around the world for different things. I mean, it's a treasure of document. And I'm not someone just sits there for hours reading documents. But it is fun because you'll see a subject line and you'll think, well, that's kind of interesting. Well, I need to look at that, look at this treaty, look at this document and what it says. And you can really beef up your knowledge. I mean, so at least if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, it doesn't have to be a confrontational conversation, but if you're just talking with people, you have some sort of an education about what you're talking about, and you can have these documents, you can have these sources, and you can use them however way it helps you best. And that's pretty much this. It was a multi-purpose book. It was to dispel all these lies, but it was also to provide people with source material to where they could take what I wrote, but then they can even go beyond that on their own. And that's why they have all these sources. Because if I wrote I'd still be writing, have 20, 30 years to take me to write a book. And it'd be like the budget. It'd take, 4 or 5 semi trucks to drag it into the the bookseller.
So true. So true. Well, I tell you, is there anything else here, Matt, that you'd want to cover here before we
I will. We kind of skipped one section of it. It's about the faith of the fathers. I went in, and it's a section of its own about the thoughts and the writings of the founding fathers about God, about the nation, God in the nation, so forth. I've got the names we all know in there. I've got some obscure names. The more obscure ones, there's not too much that I could find on them, but I did find some things. Found some things on Thomas Paine, because they talk about Thomas Paine, even though Thomas Paine didn't have any part of any of the founding documents. They try to throw Thomas Paine in there. I have in there where John Adams actually calls Thomas Paine a blackguard because of his change in beliefs in relation to the Enlightenment that was going on in France, which, Thomas Paine was pretty much disowned by the main circle of founding fathers when he came out with the Age of Reason. And John Adams just kind of tears him up in this letter.
I know. That's so true.
He's like, he's no founding father of mine. Kind of.
I'm glad you brought him up. I didn't even think to. So yes.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah. So we have that in there. Again, it's all sourced. You can go find it all, read it for yourself. Absolutely. You don't have to believe me. It's all there.
And there's the name of the book, The Founding Fathers. What did they really say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles by Matt Clark. You can find this very easily at Amazon.com.
And it's also in Kindle. It's also in Kindle.
Ooh.
Which you don't have to get the paperback. You can get the Kindle.
That's good. Man, you put a lot of effort in this. It shows. It's a tremendous resource. I won't even call it a book. I'll just call it a resource. It's just great stuff. Matt Clark, I appreciate you making time here.
I appreciate you having me on, Keith. I really do. I do appreciate it.
It was I've enjoyed it immensely.
I hope we can talk again.
Yeah, and share this link. Either this, we get the YouTube link, youtube.com/@the-mic. It'll also be pinned to the top shortly over at Keith Malinak on Twitter. And make sure that people that you know who you're thinking of them right now. The people in your life that you're like, man, I just cannot get through to these people. Share this conversation with them and let them absorb it on their own. And then maybe next time you see them, they can talk to you about Matt's book. and just for everyone to know, this book is not promoting or endorsing any kind of establishment of any kind of religion or movement of any kind. This is strictly documental fact. That's all it is. Just the facts, man.
Just the facts. Just the facts.
Okay, and don't forget the Facebook page as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the final Thursday deep dive until 2025. So if you want to mark your calendars, January 9th, we'll be back with more deep dive conversations Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You got 6 months. We've been doing this for 6 months. I'm sure you've missed at least one or two along the way with your busy lives and everything. So just go to the pinned tweet at the top of at Keith Malinak and try to catch up there. Friday live stream, the final one for 2024 will be tomorrow. And then those will continue again on Friday, January 10th. So I will see you back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern with my buddies Travis and Dom. So until then, take care of yourselves and spread this thing around and make sure people that need to see this get a hold of it. Thanks so much, everyone, for making time. Matt, it was awesome. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much, sir.
Yep. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving.